Hey everyone, today we're gonna learn some very interesting traps that we can play both as white and black in the Evans Gambit. So let's get started with the position that we get after e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and after bishop to c4 and bishop to c5. This is a very common position that we get in the Italian game. And here the move b4 leads the game to the Evans Gambit. This is a crazy move, sacrificing a pawn. The main idea is to get a very quick c3 and d4. White also has other nice attacking ideas, as we'll see. So let's start with the most natural moves for black that will lead to some interesting traps for white. So bishop takes b4 is the most natural way to capture the pawn. The knight on c6 is covering the pawn e5, although as we'll see later, knight takes b4 is an interesting try. And here white's idea is to go c3, and now the bishop has to move. Here black has two main lines. Bishop to e7 is quite passive, bishop to d6 is awkward. That's why black normally goes either bishop to a5 or bishop to c5. If black had this position for the first time, bishop to c5 might look more natural. The bishop was on c5, so it goes back to c5. And here white has a few options. d4 straight away is possible. Castling is also very interesting because black already has to be careful. Here black's best try is to go bishop to b6, anticipating the move d4 in order to play the move d6 to hold the center. Because a very natural developing move like knight to f6 will put black in a lot of trouble after the move d4. We attack the bishop, we go for our main idea, and black's position is quite uncomfortable already. Bishop to d6 is the best try, although white has ideas to trade on e5 and then push f4 and e5. If your opponent had this position for the first time, they will most likely either take on d4 or move the bishop to b6. If they take on d4, we're gonna capture back with the c-pawn, attack the bishop, then we go e5, we're kicking back black's pieces, white already has a very large advantage. Or if black tries the move bishop to b6, we can simply take on e5. If the knight goes to g4, then we go bishop to g5, attacking the queen. Black has nothing better than to go f6, and then the king is gonna be quite uncomfortable on e8, not being able to castle. Or after knight takes e4, which seems to be good for black because black captures a very important central pawn. Now we have the move queen to d5 and we get a fork. We're either gonna checkmate black or capture the knight on e4. So after bishop takes b4 and c3, another idea for black is to go bishop to a5. The main idea being that after the move d4, black captures and now the pawn on c3 is pinned, so white cannot take on d4. But actually we're still gonna go for this line because now we're gonna castle and we're gonna get a very strong initiative for the sacrifice material, so here we give another pawn. In this position, if black is greedy and keeps on grabbing pawns, now we're gonna play the move queen to b3, which is another very important idea for white in the Evans. Put pressure against f7. Black has to defend that very important pawn. That can only be done with the queen. If the knight goes to h6, then we're gonna capture on h6. If the queen goes to e7, now we can simply take on c3. We have ideas like bishop to a3 or knight to d5. This position is already very easy to play and very dangerous for black. That's why here black normally plays the move queen to f6. And here we're gonna play the move e5. We keep on attacking. Here black should not take the pawn e5, go something like queen to g6. Then white will take on c3. White still has a very nice position. Because after the move knight takes e5, which even though it is greedy, it might be an interesting try for black because after we trade knights, even though we take on f7, now black goes king to f8. Black is ready to develop the knight. For example, after a move like bishop to a3, we go d6. The knight might even go to h6, attacking the bishop. There might even be ideas of going c2, attacking white's pieces. But knight takes e5 is actually a bad move because here white can play the move rook to e1, pinning the knight, and after d6, now we go queen to a4 and we get a fork, we give a check, I'm gonna take on a5. Black would still try the move king to f8, and here instead of taking on a5, because black's idea is to take on c4, we can first take on e5 and then we capture the bishop on a5. So after bishop takes b4, c3, bishop to a5, we go d4, and after black takes on d4, we castle. Taking on c3 is definitely risky for black, so black might try to develop. If the knight goes to e7, as we see knight to g5 is quite annoying, so black might try delaying the development of the knight. By the way, here black's best tries to go knight to f6, which might look a bit scary because e5 is a common idea, although in this case after e5, black might counter with the move d5. Instead, if black delays short castling, for example by going bishop to b6, we can simply take on d4, and after a move like d6, which has developed the knight, white still has a very comfortable position. For example, after bishop to g4, we can go bishop to b5, planning to go d5. And if black finally decides to develop the knight to e7, here we have another very aggressive idea. In the Evans, we go knight to g5, we put pressure on f7 in a different way. And after black castles, now the queen, instead of going to b3, it can go to h5, and it's gonna be a crushing attack for white. We plan to take on h7, and after h6, knight takes f7, we attack the queen. If black decides to move the queen, knight takes d6 would be good enough, attacking the queen. But here we could even force a checkmate. After knight takes, we get a double check, and after the king moves, knight to f7, king to g8, and queen to h8, we get a very pretty checkmate. Now let's analyze some interesting ideas for black. After the move b4, one idea is to simply not take the pawn on b4 and avoid the main complications. Black can simply go bishop to b6, and now the onus is on white to prove that the move b4 is useful. Now black is ready to go d6, develop knight to f6. Black gets very natural development, but here white might be tempted to go b5, attacking the knight and then planning to take the pawn on e5, this very important pawn. Here black has a few options. Knight to a5 is interesting, knight to d4 is also another very interesting try for black. Here white should take on d4 and we get a fairly even position, but white might be tempted to take this very important pawn on e5, and white also has pressure on f7, but here black has the very strong move queen to g5. We attack the knight and the pawn on g2, and this position is actually already winning for black. If black takes on f7, even though we get a fork, black will take on g2, black plans to take the rook with a check, and after the rook moves to f1, queen takes e4, we give a check. If the queen blocks the check, we simply take on e2 with the knight, and after bishop to e2, we get a very pretty smothered checkmate after knight to f3. So after queen to g5, the threat of taking on g2 is just too strong. White can take on f7 with the bishop, but here black will simply move the king. We still have the same idea, so here white should castle and give the knight on e5, and here black has a clearly better position with an extra knight. Now let's see another interesting idea for black. In this position, black might take the pawn on b4 with the knight instead of the bishop. And here white might transpose into the other line after c3 and knight to c6. Here we get a similar position. Instead of taking with the bishop and then going back to c5, black took with the knight and then the knight went back to c6. But after knight takes b5, taking on e5 might look a lot more interesting because white gets this very important central pawn, and now there's pressure on f7. But in this position, black could also play the move queen to g5, but the move queen to f6 is also very strong because we have pressure on f2, we attack the knight. If white tries to go back with the knight to g4, defending f2, black will simply capture the rook on a1. So the main way for white to continue should be the move d4, which is a counter-attacking move. It defends the knight and attacks the bishop, but here black has the very pretty bishop takes d4, and after queen takes, knight takes e2, we get a fork, and black is going to win white's queen. And before I move on with the last trap, if you want to improve at chess besides learning opening traps, I have a free course that will provide you with a training plan for that, so feel free to check the link in the description. And the last idea that black can try here to create some very nice traps is to go d5. This is a very crazy counter gambit, just ignoring the move b4, and here white has to make an important decision. This position might even be hard for white to play for the first time, and the main idea is to go for an improved version of the move knight takes b4. For example, after bishop takes, knight takes b4, we take the pawn on b4 with the knight again, and we attack the bishop on d5. Black has a very comfortable position here. White might take on d5 with the pawn, and after knight takes, we also get a similar position where the knight on b4 is attacking the pawn on d5, although this should be white's best try to fight for an advantage. But the other alternative that white might try here is to take the bishop on c5. That's the main idea of the move b4. And here black could simply take the bishop on c4, getting a very good position. But another idea is to go d takes e4, inviting white to go wrong. So in this position, white is a piece up. But if white moves the knight, trying to keep the material, after queen to d4, black is going to get the material back with interest. So here, even white has to be careful to keep the balance. White should play the move bishop to b2, controlling the d4 square. Now black can simply take the piece back, and after queen takes, knight to f6, we get a fairly even position. Black has very easy development, for example, queen to e7, and bishop to e6 will follow. So you now know some very interesting traps and the main ideas in the Evans Gambit for both colors. Hope that you can use them in your games. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.